Welcome, everyone. We'll take just another minute to let our audience in from the waiting room, and then we'll kick things off. All right, it looks like we have most of our participants in from the waiting room. We'd like to welcome you once again, and thank you for joining us for today's special webinar, Expanding Horizons, Diverse Career Options with an Accounting Degree. My name is Casey Jones. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Admissions with our graduate programs here at Gies College of Business. That does cover a portfolio of options for accounting interested students, including 2 master's degrees on campus, as well as a fully online master's degree in accounting and a portfolio of graduate certificates. Really pleased to be joined today by a faculty member from Gies, a former CFO, as well as many of our former alums, or current alums, I should say, to share their experience, their perspective, and their career trajectories. If you should have any questions during today's presentation, please go ahead and use the Q&A function. Both myself and my colleague Kate Deering will be managing that throughout our conversation today. You can ask questions about our programs or questions for our panelists, and if we have time, we'll address those live at the end of today's presentation. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, Brian Hamm. Brian is an alum of Gies Business at the University of Illinois and has been teaching in our program since 2018. Prior to joining Gies, he served as the CFO for both Energizer and TrueGreen. He's passionate about developing the next generation of business leaders by bringing his experiences as CFO into the classroom. Brian brings a passion and energy into the classroom and is dedicated to helping students understand the why behind the numbers. Brian is joined by fellow Gies alum in today's conversation. Brian?
Thanks, Casey, and hello, everyone. I'm really excited for today's session. We have 4 great panelists, and hopefully they're going to be great examples of the optionality that an accounting degree can provide. I think an accounting degree is so unique because you can go in so many different directions, and it does provide you that optionality. And then if you continue on and get your master's in accounting, it can kind of supercharge that. And so our 4 panelists are friends of mine and also my son and all Gies alumnus. So thanks everyone for joining. And as Casey mentioned, please post your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll make sure that we try to get to those at the end. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the panelists so they can introduce themselves. I have some prepared questions and also some questions that you all have submitted in advance. But Sunder, go ahead if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. And obviously appreciate all the good work you do, kind of leading that next generation into the world of accounting and finance. My name's Sunder Reddy. I graduated Illinois in 1994. It should be noted that John, Troy, and Brian graduated in 1995. So rode my coattails to the careers that they have. So they're forever indebted to me. But today I am the CFO of a company called LaserAway. It's the largest aesthetic dermatology company in the country. Prior to this, I was the CEO and CFO at SoulCycle, which is a fitness brand. And prior to that, I was an investment banker on Wall Street for over a dozen years. And I started my career in the accounting world after getting my accounting degree from the University of Illinois. And, obviously, when you look at my career, it's gone all the way from accounting to Wall Street to the operating world. And I think apropos to Brian's comments earlier, the optionality I've had to build a career and do different things and exercise different muscles really started with the foundation of accounting. And so I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys. Obviously, it's fun to be able to share experiences and be a resource for all of you as you're thinking about the future.
Thanks, Sunder. Troy?
Hi, everyone. Troy Oder, also graduate of University of Illinois, class of 95. I started my career at Arthur Andersen, which was one of the big 6 accounting firms at the time. That's obviously been narrowed down to kind of the final 4. And I found it to be a great place to start my career in the sense that It provided a number of opportunities to observe career options by being a part of a very large and dynamic professional services firm. So the accounting degree paired with the decision to start at a big professional services firm like that opened a lot of doors for me over time. I moved within Arthur Andersen from the audit practice into the transaction services group after a couple of years of audit. Should be noted, I will acknowledge Sunder's role in making that decision. He introduced me to that team, and it was my introduction to what ultimately became my long-term career, which has to do with leverage buyouts and mergers and acquisitions. That practice, the transaction services group, which is a group that's similar to where Colin works today, provided financial and accounting due diligence in the context of private equity, leverage buyout transactions. I decided to move from that group into a banking environment. I moved to a firm called Fleet Capital, which is part of Fleet Bank. And that was a specialty lending practice within an East Coast bank that is now, through a series of acquisitions, part of Bank of America. And I learned how to underwrite debt transactions, which is essentially what I do today. I had an opportunity to move from Fleet to Merrill Lynch Capital. There was a business unit that was formed within Merrill Lynch that was dedicated to the task of doing exactly the types of deals that I was doing at Fleet. So I was able to be a part of the formation of that group, which was an excellent experience. And then the great financial crisis forced me to make a decision to move to another firm because the business unit I was part of at Merrill Lynch was effectively vaporized through the great financial crisis. And I joined a private investment firm called Golub Capital, which is where I've been for the past 17 years. And we are part of the private credit ecosystem, which is a rapidly growing and dynamic industry that frankly didn't exist in its current form at the time I graduated. So I've been at Golub for 17 years. My primary role at Golub is as an originator, finding transaction opportunities for the firm, and looking forward to having a great conversation with everyone today.
Thanks, Troy. John?
Yeah, these guys have really set the table for the flexibility that comes with an accounting degree. I'd start just by saying it's the language of business. If you take accounting, as Brian started out by saying, there's so many things that you can go into. If you want to go in the most, I'd say different would be going to something for marketing. I think it's easier to go from accounting to marketing than it would be from marketing to accounting. And so it's a great foundation. I appreciated that. I wasn't necessarily as interested in starting out in the accounting field, so I went straight to law school up at Loyola in Chicago. I still wanted to be around these guys, but I wanted to take a little bit of a different path. So I went to law school. I kind of look at that as you get the accounting, which is a foundation to understand the numbers. For me, law school helped me understand how to think about an argument and build an investment thesis, combine those two together, and then I ended up going straight into non-accounting, non-traditional accounting practice, doing investment management for State Farm. And so in that role, it would be different than Troy, but there'd be certain types of similarities where I do fixed income investing, but as an organization, we have 350 billion of assets. My group would have 150 billion of assets, and we'd probably invest somewhere around $25 billion per year across the fixed income space. But we're exposed to commercial mortgage loans, real estate, standard equity, private placement debt, not private credit, where Troy's at. I remember him giving me a hard time several years ago and saying, Melito, when you're ever ready to get your hands dirty, come over and try to work with me. But I stay in the investment grade market. We're more transaction oriented. It's a little bit safer, a little bit more stability, but that's important for insurance companies. But we're a big allocator of capital. And the reason that I was able to get the opportunity that I was able to get is because the background that I had, and accounting led that foundation. Like I said, understanding numbers, then you're able to understand the story of a company, and then you're able to make a business decision. So I've been extremely grateful for that. And then I'd also throw a little bit of a shout out to your professor here, Professor Hamm. He in college, he has always been somebody that's been interested and willing to teach people. I remember ACCI 254. He explains that was the Fin 254, the intro to finance class, and he talked about some basics with me, and that really, eventually led to my career. And it's funny how some small things can have a big influence on you. So I've always appreciated that. But you all are lucky to have professors that care about the students the way that they do.
I appreciate it, John. And I'll have you and Troy chime in as to the coattails that Sunder talked about that we rode.
I rode
of
everybody's
his.
coattails, and I'm okay with that. I've told you before, hang out with smart people, you'll do better.
Sunder was supposed to graduate in 1989, and then we came along and we drug him across the finish line in 1994 is how I remember it. But we can talk about that later. Colin, go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Colin Hamm. Bit shorter background than these guys, but I graduated from U of I in 2020 with my master's in accounting and a concentration in data analytics. Right after college, I joined PwC in their audit practice with a focus on companies in the financial services space. After about 1 year, I pivoted to more of an M&A and deals focused role, as Troy mentioned, where I've been ever since, day to day. Help clients kind of analyze potential acquisition targets. And I spend most of my time working in the healthcare field, but I've done, everything from technology to consumer goods. And have found that the accounting degree at U of I really provided a strong background for the career and kind of allowed me to seamlessly make the pivot from audit to more of an M&A focused role.
Great. Thanks, you guys. I'll go ahead and jump into the Q&A because but thanks for providing your introduction and the background, because I think it is a proof point that, accounting or an accounting degree, obviously the typical career path is Big Four, audit, tax, but it doesn't have to be that, right? It can start there and then kind of branch out. And as Casey was talking about, for me personally, I started in Big Four and then went to work for Pepsi and then Energizer and then TruGreen, and then eventually came back to my alma mater and now teaching, right? And so whether it be a teacher or an investment banker or CEO, a CFO, right? Accounting and the accounting degree and that foundation that it provides just provides so much optionality. And like I said before, I think it's unique amongst the other business degrees that you could obtain. And so with that, Sunder, very interesting career. Started Arthur Andersen, went to Goldman Sachs. You're a CFO and an interim CEO of SoulCycle, now CFO of Laserway, right? Can you talk a little bit more about, how that accounting degree, that accounting background really helped you, whether it be in investment banking or your current CFO role, or even during CEO at SoulCycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to something John said, which accounting being the language of, kind of the financial world, it is true, right? When you think about all the things, whether I was an accountant, whether I was an investment banker, whether I was an operator, in all scenarios, I had to be able to understand, financial statements at the end of the day, right? That's how companies get judged. And the ability to read a financial statement, and I know there's classes around this and probably more advanced classes around this than when I was around, is important, right? It is, like being able to read and interpret what's happening. And that has been something early on when you start your career in accounting. It's a discipline, right? Accounting is a rules-based practice. There's not a lot of subjectivity, at least in the early years. And, at the end of the day, it teaches you a discipline, it teaches you an approach, and it gives you, I think, the ability to quickly decipher what's happening when you look at a company's financial statements, right? And, I think this concept of you can go from accounting to a lot of things, but not the other way is a real one, right? I always tell people, if you're an expert in finance, it would take me a very long time to teach you accounting. If you're an expert in accounting, it doesn't take me that long to teach you finance. And that is a truism all the way through. And I think that's a very important point, because accounting is a true science discipline. It's rules-based. You have to understand it. And some of the greatest investors in the world, and John obviously knows this, being a user of financial statements and financials, some of the greatest investors in the world, including Warren Buffett, hold very sacred financial statements and what accountants do and the way the accounting rules work. GAAP is very complicated. You need to learn it, but there are reasons GAAP exists. And for all the other stuff that people do around financial statements and pro formas, this, that, and the other, GAAP has been tried and true in terms of telling you how a company's performing. And so all of those things across the various things I've done have been sort of connected with that thread of accounting, which I've used in every single facet. And so, you know, when you think about versatility along the course of your career, that's something that's been consistent for me. So.
Great. Thanks, Sunder. John, you took an interesting path, right? And so you got your accounting undergraduate degree, but then you went into law school. And now, you know, within State Farm, you know, you're in the investment division focused on fixed income, corporate credit, structured bonds, and liquidity, right? And so can you talk to us about, so accounting and then law school, and then talk to us a little bit more about your role at State Farm and how accounting helps all of those.
The accounting part, you know, Sunder laid it out. You need to be able to understand the numbers. I think about Sunder and Troy and their history with investment banking. They would have had to build models. And Sunder's right. It's easier to understand accounting and learn finance than learn finance and understand accounting. But what it helps you to know is, like, you're going to have to estimate some numbers. You're going to know how far you're off, how far the reach of your estimation is when you've got an accounting foundation. When you start out with just finance or other areas, you may not know the degree of stretch that you're taking, and then how far you're pushing your model to be, I'd say, less accurate. So that's what accounting really helped me with, that trend analysis, understanding where I could estimate the numbers and what was too much of a stretch. The law school part, when I first started out, I started out in the private placement world, and it's not to be confused with private credit that Troy talks about. Private placement is investment grade debt in private companies, but Troy would be familiar with this too. There's a lot of covenant packages, documentation affiliated with this. The accounting background helped me with that. And then just understanding how to break down an argument. And when you're in the legal field, you have to interpret data and make an argument for your case. And you're doing the same thing for an investment. I'm interpreting financial statements, and then I'm making an argument for how much we want to invest in that name or not invest in that name. So that's how it all worked out. Being at State Farm was just luck. You know, when I was going to grad school, I wanted to have a broad background. So I did know exactly what I wanted to do, but I really thought I was going to be in derivatives and options. And I could have ended up further from that because an insurance company is a lot more conservative, but it was a great opportunity to just get in the field. And then once I got my foot in the door here, there's been a lot of opportunities within the investment category that I've been able to kind of transition around and with. So it worked out real well. But it's funny because the one thing that we cannot invest in, you know, that we have a mandate against, we can't do derivatives or options. And that's what I thought I'd want to do as a career. So it's funny.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, right? Because I think all of us, you know, so we got an accounting degree. We didn't have a long-term 10, 15, 20-year plan. It's, you know, that accounting degree, again, provides you that optionality. You work hard, you be good to people, and, you know, opportunities are going to present themselves. And then, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that State Farm, and I think your division within State Farm usually offers an internship opportunity.
Yeah.
And I would love to get that Gies pipeline going and
Yes.
filling some of those internship roles at State Farm within your group.
Thank you for the plug, Brian.
Yep. There you go. Troy, so you started your career at Arthur Andersen, Fleet Boston, Merrill Lynch, and now Golub Capital, right? So can you talk a little bit more about Golub Capital, kind of what they do and what's your role? You touched on it earlier, but if you can provide a little bit more detail, because I think it's an area that maybe a lot of learners aren't familiar with.
Yeah, and I think before diving into the specifics of what I do at Golub, I'll re-emphasize the point you just made, which is I've had a very roundabout path to the career that I've ended up, you know, creating for myself. And, one of the cliches I remember hearing as a student graduating from undergrad and just embarking on my career is you'll probably have a job at some point in your life that doesn't exist today. And that was hard for me to get my head around. I think the fact that we have an audience full of, analytical, sort of methodical thinkers, as evidenced by the fact that they've chosen accounting as as an undergraduate degree. That idea is probably a little bit uncomfortable because I think we would all prefer to think in terms of, straight lines and clear paths from point A to point B. But I would, if you're thinking in those terms, I'd sort of reset your expectations a little bit because careers by definition tend to be a little bit unpredictable. And in fact, the private equity ecosystem and the private credit ecosystem specifically that exists today did not exist at the time I graduated. What we do fundamentally in private credit is we lend money to privately held businesses that are being acquired by private equity firms. So the analysis that we perform in connection with, analyzing a potential opportunity is very technical in nature. We have to understand at a very deep level the financial performance of the business that we're contemplating lending money to. And there's also sort of a layer of understanding the narrative. There are two different key considerations when you're evaluating an investment opportunity, those being the numbers and the story behind the numbers. And we spend a lot of time understanding the strategic direction the business is headed, what plans the private equity firm that may be considering an investment would have to change the strategic direction of the business. We assess the strength of management. So those are softer skills, but they're all built around the framework of the hardcore number crunching analysis that is the core of our risk assessment and underwriting process at Golub. So the easy analogy, if you want to think about what private credit is, the same way that you and I might borrow money to buy a house, these private equity firms borrow money to buy businesses, and we provide those loans. My specific role in that context is transaction origination. So that means that I'm responsible for managing our firm's relationships with private equity partners. I spend a lot of time in their offices, just understanding their investment theses in different industries where we're active, where they're active, and then they call me when they have an opportunity they think might be a fit for our firm, and then we begin our underwriting of that opportunity. And the most important thing I think I could say about my specific role is that it's built on a base of I'll call it a deep technical understanding of the underwriting process. Everybody that does what I do at Golub has at least 10 years of underwriting or risk assessment experience. So before I can go out in the marketplace and represent our firm and speak confidently about what we're capable of doing for our private equity partners, it's important to have kind of a deep understanding of how we approach these investments by doing the work that's required to really assess those opportunities at a technical level, and that's what our underwriting team does. I spent 10 years of my career across Fleet, Merrill Lynch, and even the early days at Golub doing exactly that. So that gives me the technical background that's required for me to be confident in the market when I'm talking about what we can do for our clients.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of things there. One is analytical skills and soft skills, and I really focus on kind of communication. And that's a piece of advice that I always give my students is that as you're competing for jobs and promotions and things like that, you're going to be competing with a lot of good accountants. But what really is going to allow you to set yourself apart and advance up that career ladder is you being able to communicate with others, to be able to make numbers come to life, to explain the why. And so if you can touch on that a little bit more as far as kind of the communication elements, obviously accounting is important, but you have to sit in front of a client, you have to relate to them, you have to also help explain numbers to maybe those that don't have a background in accounting and finance. So if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Those types of communication skills are critical. And I think the way you build them is by getting out and doing as much networking as you possibly can early in your career. I think one of the hot topics that still exists, I have a son who's, just beginning, he's wrapping up his time in the MAS program and is beginning his professional career. And working from home is something that I believe is a consideration for a lot of young people that are, starting their first jobs out of school. My advice is simple: don't do it. Get out, circulate in the business community, find as many opportunities to network outside of the office as you can. And, I think of your business career is a little bit like, a raffle at a fundraiser. You must be present to win. So I think finding opportunities to get outside your comfort zone, talk to people, as many interesting people as you can find, learn from them, ask a ton of questions, be curious, and use those conversations as an opportunity to hone those communication skills. And I think the other part of it is, this is a little bit outside the scope of, the accounting conversation, but you should also aspire to be an interesting person. Find interesting hobbies that, you are passionate about outside of work, and that'll give you something to talk about, something to relate to other people about. And you'll find that, building personal relationships with people and being able to communicate with them, at a very meaningful level, usually starts with a basis of, some common ground that you find that has nothing to do with, your professional work. So that would be my advice: is spend as much time interacting with as many smart people as you can at a very early stage in your career, and use those conversations as an opportunity to sharpen your communication skills.
Yeah. And one of the things we'll talk about later is the CPA exam and the importance of the CPA exam. I remember going to DKH with you and studying late at nights, and then taking that CPA exam in I think it was in the Peoria Auditorium, or Civic Center or something.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about that in a bit. So Colin, on to you. So you are the most recent graduate. So you got your bachelor's in accounting, then you got your master's in accounting. So with a focus on data analytics, right? So can you talk about your decision to, number one, focus on data analytics, and two, can you talk more about your role in M&A, transaction services, due diligence? So what does that mean, and what do you do?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's kind of starting with the second question first, right? So transaction due diligence. I help advise my clients, which are primarily private equity firms, but also some privately held companies, on potential acquisitions, helping them kind of understand what's a normal level of earnings and what should they be buying this business for, as well as other, accounting related concepts that'll impact the structure of the deal. And like I said, I spend most of my time working in the healthcare field, and also do some work in technology and consumer goods. And that just really allowed me to see a wide variety of industries, and kind of understand, how accounting differs from industry to industry. Whereas, consumer goods, you're going to see a lot of inventory, whereas healthcare, you kind of have to understand people cost and lease accounting and things like that at a deeper level, to kind of understand how that impacts the P&L and the balance sheet. And then going on to data analytics, right? When I made the decision to kind of take the data analytics path, I think it was 2018 or 2019. And that was kind of when firms really started to first talk about the importance of data and big data, and understanding how to manipulate data. So it felt like a very natural kind of next step. And I felt like going into the workplace, it provided a really strong understanding of some of the data tools and how to work them day to day. Whereas, maybe some folks who just did the undergraduate or didn't have kind of that same experience wouldn't have. And that kind of allows you to be more efficient in your job and kind of work through maybe the mundane tasks in a quicker manner, and frees you up to think at a higher level. And that kind of allows you to progress quicker in your career, as you're able to kind of take on more responsibility and think about more complex tasks.
Great. Yeah. And so Gies is a leader in data analytics, right? And so we've invested pretty heavily. We have a lot of students focused in that, because it's a demand from employers, right? And so it's another way you can separate yourself and stand out and advance in your career. And so thanks everyone for that. Now I want to pivot into getting a master's in accounting, right? And so I'm going to start with Troy. So Troy, you mentioned earlier your son graduated from Gies in accounting as an undergrad, and then continued to get his master's in accounting. And so, first as a father, so why did you think that was a good idea for your son to follow that type of path? And then also as an employer. And so when you see someone that has a degree from Gies and also a master's of accounting, from Gies, what's that tell you?
Yeah, I think a few things. Number one, I think it's always smart to get as many certifications as you can as a young person. And what I mean by that is a master's degree is another proof point that you're capable of doing something that's difficult and that you are dedicated to the task of being a lifelong learner. So I think that just at a very basic level has very strong signal value to employers. The things that I specifically liked about the Gies program were, number one, I think it provides a broader business perspective than any of the individual undergraduate business degrees that you may have, pursued at Gies. I'll echo something that Colin said around the data analytics focus. Everything in the modern business environment is measured and analyzed, and that is an absolutely critical, sort of concept for you to understand as a new graduate. There's this, sort of broad software category centered around business intelligence that is focused on the task of being able to tease out, kind of critical business functions, how to, move the needle is a term we use around here at Golub a lot, by changing business practices to make them more efficient, more effective, more thoughtful. And all of that is driven by gathering, processing, analyzing, and implementing data. So it's something that is fundamentally inescapable in the modern business world. And the idea that that is, one of the core underpinnings of the MAS program was very appealing to me. And then the other part of it is, this was a program that didn't exist at the time that you and I were undergraduates, Brian, but I really like the idea that it provides a structured, environment and a specific time period in your life to study for the CPA exam. And I think it's typical for, students in that program to be simultaneously sitting for the exam. It's what my son is doing. I know that's what Colin did as well. And so all those things I think are really appealing for a variety of reasons. But those are the big three that jump to mind immediately.
Thanks, Troy. And then Colin, you're the most recent graduate and also went through the Masters of Accounting program. So can you talk about the difference in the types of courses that you took as an undergraduate accounting major versus at the master's levels, right? And so is it the same old, just more difficult questions, or is how you learn, how you work, is it really that much different?
Yeah, so some of the differences between, the undergraduate accounting and the graduate accounting are, I think that the undergraduate really provides a strong foundation of many accounting topics. But once you start to get into the graduate courses, right, you're going to focus on some more of the nuanced topics of accounting that maybe don't get covered in as much detail in the undergraduate courses. And also with the graduate courses, I feel like there's a lot more focus on group projects, teaming together with your classmates. Because, when you join the working world, that's what you're going to be doing. It's not homework and test. It's working with other folks and communicating and, getting up in front of your class and speaking and showing that you can kind of articulate what you understand about a certain topic. And the undergraduate does a good job of that as well. But I feel like that's really the focus of the graduate program. And on top of that, like Troy mentioned, right, there's the graduate program provides kind of I won't call it dedicated time, but there's more time to study for the CPA, and your professors kind of understand that everyone is in that boat. So they're a lot more, I wouldn't say lenient, but they just understand what you're doing. So there's that kind of that time built in. And another plus of the graduate program is the CPA covers, you'll get one or two questions about some super nuanced topics. And I feel like the graduate program actually does a really good job of covering that. I remember one specific course on accounting for derivatives, kind of to Melito's wannabe career in a past life. I just thought back to that class and was able to kind of super easily answer it. And I'm sure that there was a handful of situations like that, but the graduate program kind of covered those topics, whereas the undergraduate program wouldn't have.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful because I teach at the undergraduate level and I also teach in the IMBA, IMSA, and MAS and MSA program, right? And so I'm able to, from an instructor standpoint, see the difference, right? At the undergraduate level, we're talking about debits and credits and some of the fundamental accounting concepts. And then in my classes at the master's level, it's really focused on, well, those entries are made. Now, what do you do with the financial statements? How do you analyze it? How do you evaluate business decisions? How do you look at trends and things like that? And so it's really putting those financial statements to work after, all the accounting entries have been made. And so that's very helpful. So advice for our students. And so I want each of the panelists to kind of go one by one and say, what's some career advice that you would give to students? And so, John, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, your career is in your own hands. So we talked a lot about things that you could do. You have to decide what you want to do. I think about all these panelists. We approached how we were going to expand our horizons in different ways. So, Sunder, I think you were the first one that. So I went to law school, right out of school, but you were in the working field, and you went back and you got your MBA from Chicago to make a career transition. I mean, great institute. I mean, outstanding institution also. So he wanted to drive his career in a certain way. Troy had a passion for certain areas of investment and had to figure out how to get some footholds there. For me, I started out right away where I knew that I wanted to go to law school. So all these things are in your own hand. Some people may decide my personality, I really just want to stay within accounting. I like these rules. I like some of this rigidity that's there. And that totally works. But for people that want to do something else, you can, but you have to put yourself out there, as Troy talked about. You can't just sit there and let it come to you. But if you put yourself out there, there's a lot of different opportunities. So people, and some of the question, what should I watch on TV? Should I watch CNBC or Bloomberg TV? Yes, you should watch those, but that's not going to get you a job at Goldman Sachs. Now you've got to do more things within these institutions, the consulting groups within Illinois, the investment groups that are there. You've got to be more participative. You've got to put yourself out, travel abroad, work experience. Troy talked about networking. Those are all way more important than when you and I were undergrad. I mean, you had to get a 3.5 on a 4. You did some sort of a part-time job and you had an accounting degree. You were a good chance you were going to get a job offer from the Big Six. It's different now. And I think that's great, but these things are in students' hands. So take control of your own career.
I think that's great advice. I mean, get involved, get comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
And build your network. So that's great advice. Sunder, what advice do you have for those?
Yeah, look, I agree with everything John said. Just to piggyback a little bit on that. I mean, the great thing about accounting is, like we talked about, it's a little bit more of a science and a disciplined profession. It's a great place to start, right? Because when you start, you're not just employing what you learned in school, you're learning how to interact with clients, you're learning how to interact in big organizations, you are learning project management, you are learning how to solve problems and all of those things. So to me, the first step, wherever you decide to go out of Gies is to, get a foundation and start, working to learn the skills that you're good at and maybe the ones that you're not good at or things you like and don't like. And like John said, you don't have to presuppose anything, right? You're not making a decision today for the next 25 years. You want to basically have building blocks in your career. And along the way, there's going to be forks in the road. I guarantee you there'll be forks in the road. And I guarantee you, if you stick to what's authentic to you in terms of what you're good at, what you like, and you follow those paths, things will work out well, right? But you have to start somewhere. And that's the beauty of accounting, is it's one of the greater places to start, because you'll see more forks in the road going down that path than a lot of other paths that you might take. And so, I always tell people, especially young people, because I've done a lot of different things. I couldn't have plotted this out. Zero chance. right? No chance I could have done it. But I did take risk at certain times. I was opportunistic, and I wasn't going to wait for someone to hand it to me, right? I went out and got it, right? And I haven't always been successful, right? And failure is part of, what happens in your career. You learn from it, but resilience and getting back up and doing the next thing, I think, is incredibly important. So the beauty of accounting is it gives you a foundation, gives you a place to start to learn those basic skills. And then as you learn those basic skills, you learn a lot about yourself, and it gives you the option to go do other things. So
I think you made several great points, right? So take some risk. Don't be afraid to fail. I mean, all of us kind of get knocked down from time to time. And I know that taking risk, they're scary, whether it's relocating to a different city or taking on a different job, or, enrolling in the IMSA, maybe when you don't have a detailed accounting background. So take those risks, work hard, continue to build your network, and good things will happen. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Colin, any advice?
Yeah, I think something Troy said earlier that kind of stuck with me is right. And I'm a little tongue in cheek here because I'm at home today, but really go into the office, meet your coworkers, meet your peers, interact with folks. There's, I've been in the working world a lot less than these guys, but, the entire time I've been in the working world, it's kind of been this COVID virtual at-home hybrid environment. And there's just kind of a clear difference between folks that kind of go in on a regular basis, connect with their colleagues, work together, than kind of the folks who are more remote. And obviously there's a place for remote. I'm here today. It's cold in Chicago. Yeah, I think that would be my one piece of advice. And also, go to the basketball games if you decide to come to Illinois. I saw Troy and Sunder in Boston when Illinois went to the Elite Eight. And that was a good time. So go to the basketball games and come to Illinois.
Good advice. And we got a good team this year.
Yeah.
So Troy, any advice?
Yeah. So I think I'll repeat something I said earlier because it's that important. Be curious, ask questions. You're going to be graduating from an institution that can provide you with an incredibly valuable and powerful degree and a great knowledge base to build a career on. But the day that you start your first job out of undergrad, despite the fact that you've accumulated that degree and all the knowledge that goes along with it, you are going to be the least qualified person in the room because you don't have any professional experience. So be aware of that. And the way to get it is to, show up every day, work hard, ask how you can contribute, and learn from all the smarter people in the room that you're going to be surrounded by at those early stages of your career. So that level of humility as you're starting your career is critical, because despite the fact that my accounting degree from University of Illinois was a fantastic base for me to build on, I've learned meaningfully more about finance, accounting, some of the problem solving skills I've developed over the course of a 30-year career. I've learned a lot more while working actively at a multitude of different firms over the course of the past 30 years than I ever did in the classroom. So just be aware that learning is something that you continue to experience over the course of your entire career for as long as you stay a part of the working world. And the last bit of specific advice I'd say is try to stay broad for as long as possible. And what I mean by that is see if you can find an opportunity for your first job out of school that keeps as many doors open as possible. And so a big four firm, or any, frankly, professional services firm, smaller accounting firm or a consulting firm, those are great places to start your career because they provide observation points to understand what opportunities exist. They're good opportunities to discover industries that might catch your attention. They're good opportunities to discover specific skill sets that are valuable in the marketplace. And what makes them high quality first jobs is that they are broad. You're not closing any doors by starting at a professional services firm that allows you to investigate options. So think hard before making a career choice for your first job based on an industry that you think you might like at this moment in time, or a specific job that you think you might like at this moment in time, because you may change your mind. You may change your mind down the line. And, 30 plus years of a career is a long time to be stuck in a rut that you created because you were too narrow at an early point in your career. So keep that in the back of your mind as you embark on your first job is, stay broad, stay curious, make sure you're looking around because those opportunities will present themselves and you want to be in a position to, to pursue them when they show up.
Great. And so I've been looking at the chat, and I'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can. We've got about 10 minutes remaining. And so first question, and any of you guys feel free to jump in and answer these. We've all made changes and pivots in our career. How do you know when's the right time to make a career change?
Yeah, I'll take that, Brian. It goes back a little bit to what we've all said here is you never really know, right? You never plot it out so that it's a scheduled sort of point of view that at some point you're going to change careers. It evolves. And all along the way, there's uncertainty, right? Nothing is a foregone conclusion, right? I lived in Chicago my entire life. I went to school in Champaign. And then in 2001, I decided to pick up and move to New York City, right? And by the way, I started my career 1 month after 9/11, right? So you can imagine there was a lot of self-doubt, right? So I don't think you ever really know. But I also think if you trust your instincts when you feel like you're either not getting what you want out of your career or you're not tapping your own potential, those will be good, signals for maybe trying something different or going back to what I was saying earlier, taking a little bit of risk.
Yeah.
And I think this is all about self-awareness, right? I mean, self-awareness is really important. Knowing who you are, what you want along the way, making sure that you're remeasuring that and thinking about that in terms of your career. Because the last thing you want to do, and Troy said it, 30 years in a job where you're not happy, or you're in a position where you're not happy, puts a tremendous amount of pressure on you, right? So along the way, I think you've got to trust your instincts, got to keep your options open and continue to learn and be open-minded about things that you can learn and people from whom you can learn those things, right? And eventually you're going to find that those forks in the road lead to good places. So
Right.
Yeah, I'll
Anybody else
jump in
wanna
on
jump
that.
in on that?
And
Yeah,
just
go ahead, Troy.
mention that, everything Sunder said is exactly right. You have to have some level of self-awareness. You have to be prepared to take a risk from time to time. The other layer to that decision-making process is make sure that you're making a decision that is the right decision for your personal life, your family life. So one of the first pivots I made was out of the transaction services group at Arthur Andersen to my first underwriting role at Fleet. And that was at a time when I was starting my family. And I couldn't handle the work or the travel load anymore. Those were, before there was such a thing as a virtual data room, there was such a thing as a real data room, which is I had to fly to client locations and spend days on end in conference rooms with boxes full of documents. And that meant that, I was traveling typically 3.5 to 4.5 days every week. And that was, that equation didn't work at a time when my wife and I were, planning on starting a young family. So I moved from a job that required a lot of, time and effort and travel to a job that required a lot of time and effort, but less travel. And that was helpful. And then the other thing you need to be prepared for is, life comes at you fast. The other transition I made away from Merrill Lynch to Golub was not one I made voluntarily. I thought I had found the place I wanted to spend the rest of my career at Merrill Lynch, surrounded by a great group of people, really liked the work, really liked the environment, really liked being a part of something as special as Merrill Lynch was pre-great financial crisis. But the world changed in a fundamental way through that downturn. And I was forced to take a chance that I may or may not have taken if I hadn't been pressured into it by externalities. So that is more likely than not to happen to you over the course of your career. And just be aware of that. You have to think about it in the right terms. That can be every bit as much an opportunity as it is a risk. But that's something that is likely to happen to all of you at some point over the course of the next, few decades that you're working.
Right. So next question is on AI. So I get this question a lot from my students of, boy, I'm getting nervous. Is there going to be a job in an accounting for me? Is AI going to take over and do all the work of an accountant, right? And so how do you guys think AI is going to impact the accounting? And I'm not just going to focus on the accounting because all of us are examples of, yeah, we started in accounting, but we branched off. How's AI going to impact the business world?
I don't know how it's going to impact the business world specifically, but I'm hoping it does. It brings efficiencies. What I'm worried about it with the concept is answers are going to be given to more people, not sure they're fully going to understand them. So I think we're going to have to rethink about how people are learning, how much they really know versus what AI produces. But I love the fact that there's going to be more efficiencies. We talk about people problems and people challenges. I think this will make people more efficient. It will make them better. It'll increase the productivity of someone that might be a little bit more average. But I think it's also going to be important to know, what do people really understand versus what did the AI present?
Yeah, one of the things Sunder said earlier is, accounting is a rigorous logical framework that forces you to use logic, reason, and judgment. That is the skill set that you need to focus on developing. If you think about your accounting degree as, creating an outcome that allows you to memorize a rule book and apply those rules without thinking about it, you're doing it wrong. Because guess what? AI is going to be better at that rule book than any of us will ever be. Instead, you should think about it. You should think about your accounting degree as providing you with an incredible toolkit for problem solving. So some of the best investors that I've interacted with over the course of my, private credit career have no background in accounting, have no background in finance. Some of them are liberal arts majors from Ivy League schools. A lot of them are engineers. A lot of them have math and physics majors. What they all have in common is the ability to think critically. And accounting is a framework that provides a very strong basis for refining those skills. That's how you should be thinking about your accounting degree, rather than simply memorizing a set of facts and applying those facts to, a specific framework. You think about it as evidence-based decision making, which is kind of a very close cousin to the scientific process. So that'd be the framework I would encourage you to use when you're thinking about your accounting skills.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, because I think both John and Troy are spot on this. And it gets back a little bit to, accounting's a discipline, there's rules, but I agree with Troy, don't focus on that, because ultimately, as you get more mature in your career, things are going to turn from, what the data is to what the data says, and how are you storytelling it, right? When I look at, Professor Hamm, public company CFO, you had to take a lot of data and information and go talk to investors, right? That's a storytelling episode. John, when you take investment grade, opportunities to the committee at State Farm, there's storytelling. When Troy takes an LBO financing to committee, there's storytelling, right? As a CFO running an operating business where I have shareholders and, oh, by the way, private credit lenders, I'm storytelling, right? No AI is going to be able to storytell the way I can. And I think that's an important element, which is this concept of communication, interpretation, insights. Those are all still going to be things that I think human beings are going to have a real role in, as a complement to what AI is going to do, because I agree it's going to create efficiency and, a lot more productivity, but someone's always got to tell the story, right? And being able to do that and learning that skill set alongside a rigorous foundation is going to be a winning combination no matter what you do.
Great. We've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 questions really quick. One is, should I take the CPA exam? Is it going to be worth it? Right. And so one of the panelists, if you guys can chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. One, it opens up doors for you, right? Any 3 letters you can get behind your last name are good, but CPA especially, right? everybody's going to always be looking for accountants. I think there's a shortage of accountants in the workplace, and that CPA shows that you have a deeper level of understanding of accounting, and it'll set you apart amongst your peers.
Yeah.
Agree.
Last
completely.
question. Thanks. Last question. I'm gonna take this one. So I get asked the question a lot. So I'm in the IMBA program. Should I also go into the IMSA program? And my advice, my answer to that is that, you know, if you can do a dual degree, I would recommend it, right? So the IMBA program is fantastic. It's going to give you exposure in a lot of different functional areas. And it's going to really round you out as a business partner. But that IMSA degree is also going to give you that foundation of what all of our panelists talked about today, is of really understanding the accounting aspects, understanding the numbers, making numbers come to life. Because I know I'm biased, but I think the best CEOs are those that have come from a CFO background, right? Because especially as you look at different ways to try to add shareholder value and things like that, running the operations is part of it, but also capital allocation is a big part of it as well. Okay. And so with that, I want to thanks John and Troy and Sunder and Colin. It's been great catching up with you guys, and you guys have given our learners terrific advice. And so thank you so much for making time today. I appreciate it.
And thank you,
Thanks,
Brian,
Brian.
for collecting the group and hosting today's event. We really appreciate it, as well as all of our participants. Our teams are happy to follow up with any questions that we missed, so please do feel free to reach out. And thank you again all for participating and being such great Gies alums. Have a great day, everyone.